So next presentation is about ELECTRA. Okay, here I have a content slide. So first, what's the scope of ELECTRA? How we see future trends and what do we take as assumptions in ELECTRA? What do you see as high-level needs in the future electricity system? And then I discuss two options. And I go a bit deeper into detail what is the concept that was chosen for ELECTRA. So ELECTRA, the title of the project is European Liaison on the Electricity Grid, committed towards long-term research activities. Yeah, I have some figures on the project. So you see it's quite a big project. It has 21 partners from 16 countries. And I have to say all these partners are research institutes because the project originates from ERA, the Joint Program on Smart Grids. ERA is the European Energy Research Alliance, so it's an alliance of research institutes. So the partners are from all over Europe. Here you see, and these are the partners. What's the goal of the project? So the goal is to reinforce this joint program on smart grids and to build support for to realize the European set plan objectives. Now the actual scope of ELECTRA is to develop new control schemes for real-time operation of the 2030 power system. And these new control concepts will be tested on experimental level so that industrial stakeholders can take them up and bring them to actual field tests. So, in short, I can say that ELECTRA is very research-oriented, and we can think, the aim is to think really forward. So the scope, to repeat myself, so the scope is real-time voltage and frequency control for the future power system. So what we are working on is not so we have the balancing system. It consists of day-ahead markets, long-term markets, intraday markets. That's not the scope of ELECTRA, but in the end, at T0, means now, there will always be imbalances, and then something has to be done to mitigate these balances. And this is what we are working on, to define new architectures, also new monitoring solutions for real-time balancing solutions. Now in ELECTRA, we did not really define a scenario, a fixed scenario that says, for example, your renewables will be 75%, I'm just saying something. No, we just defined some trends that we believe are happening and will happen, and some assumptions, and we try to find a solution that fits in these trends. Also, I've mentioned 2030. I don't know when certain things will happen, so it's just some things probably will happen sooner, some later, but we try to define a system that fits in these trends. So what are the trends that we assume? So generation will shift from conventional big rotating dispatchable units, so things that you can regulate, let's say easily, to intermittent converter-coupled renewables. Also generators will shift from a very few, very large units to many and a lot of very small or smaller units. Also, the connection point of the generators, it will shift from mainly central transmission system connected generation to decentralized distribution system connected generation. So, in short, we will have many more generators. They will be not so easy to control, like a conventional synchronous generator, for example. And they will not always be connected to the high voltage system, but to low voltage or medium voltage system. On the other hand, electricity consumption will increase, and by this I mean consumption for example, for heating by the installation of heat pumps, and also for transportation, so because of electric cars, for example. Then also local electrical storage, we think, will become more available and affordable. And we will have many more sensors in the network, such as, for example, smart meters, but also phasor measurement units will become more available and affordable to increase the system observability. And even after that, we have new technologies. People are talking about virtual inertia, DC grids, and so on. Taking all these trends and assumptions into account, we think it will lead to a paradigm shift where the control architecture and the market architecture that's now mainly based on a load follows generation approach, a generation follows load approach, that will lead to a load follows generation approach. To do this, we need to also activate the resources that are now connected to medium and voltage and low voltage grid, which are not really activated in the overall balancing system. We have the increased observability at the low voltage levels through, for example, smart meters. And of course, we have to see that our solution is cyber secure and is resilient. Since we have more sensors and we probably will have more communication, we need to make sure nothing breaks down. So the first option that we considered is centralized control. I would call it like a business as usual approach. It's where the TSO is still in charge of balancing and he takes all decisions. Of course, since now all his levers to do something about the imbalance are mainly located at the lower voltage levels, there need to be a lot of DSO-TSO interaction. And he decides which is the best option to mitigate the imbalance and then sends back all the activation signals. This would involve a lot of communication, would also, the solution that the TSO needs to find is very hard, computationally very hard thing to calculate, and also to calculate it in a reasonable time. And let's say, to sum it up, so the TSO remains responsible for all these reserve activation decisions. So of course he needs the metering information of the observability information at the low voltage levels through the DSO-TSO coordination. Also, it might be possible that when some imbalance or something happens at a low voltage level, some congestion, I don't know, the TSO is not always aware of that, so he needs to be made aware so that he can do something about it. And this requires a lot of information flow, a lot of communication, a lot of control commands. So therefore, we decided to kind of leave that idea and to go for something else. So we go for some decentralized control, where we now make a division of the power system, of the control area of the TSO, into smaller cells, which have their local observability and their local control with a cell system operator, we'd call it, who is responsible for this voltage and frequency control. So this means that local problems are solved locally without this need for a system-wide communication and without the need for a central decision-making. Of course, we know that because of today, because you do something centrally, you can also make it more easily optimal. So we also involve some inter-cell coordination so we can have some system-wide optimization as well. So this is kind of the divide and conquer approach that we adopted in the project. So this is an illustration. So instead of one TSO being responsible for everything related to balancing and voltage, real-time voltage control in his control area, we divided it up in cells, and every cell is responsible for its own thing. So it becomes more easily to manage. Now, what is a cell? So we define a cell as a group of interconnected loads, distributed generation resources, and storage units within a well-defined electrical and geographical boundary. It's connected to its neighboring cells. It has within the cell the necessary monitoring infrastructure and control infrastructure, and it can contain multiple voltage levels. One thing is that a cell does not need to be a microgrid. So we don't require it to be in islanding mode, for example. So all this equipment for islanding mode is not necessary. Also, it does not need to be self-reliant for matching demand and supply. So as I said, ELECTRA is only on the correcting of the real-time imbalances. It's not about day-ahead or intraday markets where contracts for matching demand and supply on longer term are made. So this can be still between cells, no problem. And the cell has to be able to perform local voltage control and real-time balancing, of course. Now, how do we define the control structure then? So the core, I think, would be cell balance. Cell balance control, we call it balance restoration control, where the cell balance is measured and sent to the balance restoration control, and then certain resources, flexibility resources, any resource that can do something about the cell balance are activated, so the cell is driven back to balance. Of course, if we add up in the whole system all the cell balances, we still see a change in system frequency. So we still adopt the frequency containment control, or the primary frequency control, which is called in many countries. So where frequency is measured, and then devices are activated according to the delta frequency. The only difference that we have here of the system today is that we do not only assume big synchronous generators to do this frequency containment, but also with local on-off devices, electric vehicles, storage devices, anything that have some sort of flexibility and that can be controlled. Now, with the new system, we are not sure that we have enough inertia all the time. So we need some inertia in the grid to have a balanced, to have a stable system. And if you have, for example, a system that is mainly connected to renewables, which are connected to the grid through an inverter, you lose the big inertia of the big generators. Even the inertia of the system can change throughout the day because the generation mix of all the producing units changes during the day. During noon, there's a lot of photovoltaics. Probably during the night, the generation mix is totally different. So we add up a new control layer where the inertia is controlled and is set. It can be a dynamic control as well. And then, of course, we also need we don't look at the cells as individual cells all the time. We have some inter-cell coordination where we do the optimization, and also some reserves are freed, and this is done in the balance steering control, as we call it. So in short, what we have now is the three layers of frequency containment, frequency restoration, frequency replacement control. This is what is happening today. We add up this layer that does the inertia steering control, and we have the frequency containment control, balance restoration, which only does the balancing within cells, and then the balancing steering control after that. Then for voltage control, real-time voltage control, there we still adopt the primary voltage control, which corrects the voltage based on a local voltage measurement or on a voltage measurement from some pilot nodes. And then we think that the currently secondary voltage and tertiary voltage control, they can be combined to what we call post-primary voltage control, which set the set points of some voltage controlling equipment in the grid. So what are the next steps in the project? So further elaborating these concepts, we will detail the control loops, we will work on the controllers, and in the end, we also need to identify maybe new observables, new monitors, and new controllers to implement these new concepts. And finally, we go to lab implementation. So you can find more information on the ELECTRA website. And if any questions pop up now, I can answer them.